Tom gave me this title, and I have been struggling a lot with it. I like this slide a lot, where you see somehow academics and maybe industry shaking hands. In my past 30 years, I've worked as an academic in 3 institutes. One was where I was trained for 10 years, then have been working during the past 18 years in Amsterdam, and now I've moved to Turkey. And in all these 3 institutes, it has been easy and sometimes difficult to have a kind of collaboration with industry, because there is a common ground to collaborate, but there's sometimes a different inspiration. Obviously, the goals from industry are different from ours, but on the other hand, we cannot do without them. Funding is always one of them. And I sometimes felt that it was easier in the past than nowadays to collaborate. So how can you try to reach it? And I think the platform that has been created now as a society should actually be inviting to all our partners that have a booth outside, and some of them sitting here, to actually approach and discuss us, how we best could work together, them funding, us performing, and at the end of the day, doing something in the benefit of our patients. Yes, for this one, I have nothing to disclose, really absolutely nothing. So I tell the truth, and nothing but the truth. So when I was looking at the content of the talk, I came up with something like this: healthcare. Healthcare seems to be very important, and I think it's even more important than I ever realized. And then there is something about influential innovators. You have these magazines and journals nowadays. So many of these influential innovators sitting at this table here or sitting in this audience. And you also see that we are becoming very gender neutral is not the right word, but gender favorite nowadays. And we want to involve more and more ladies involved in research. Now, looking at healthcare, I was thinking, if this is indeed a very powerful word, what does it embrace healthcare? And when I looked at it, it says that it plays an economic role in our economy. And I've never have been looking at it like this. I always was thinking, well, healthcare is something that is freely available. It's paid by my government in the Netherlands. I can have it. It almost costs nothing. And is it important? Not really. You know, you better can become a banker or so. Or you can become an economist, but healthcare is not that important. But obviously, if you look very carefully, you can see that the value of this healthcare product is in the United States has a value of about $5 trillion per year, of course. It also determines the export status, employment, and capital investment. So then you suddenly realize that healthcare indeed is something which has a very important position in our environment in general. And we play a part in that. So why is it important? Well, there are providers. Well, who are these providers? Well, again, they're sitting here. These are the doctors, hospitals, the nurses. It's a whole team. It's not just one person looking at this. And then on the other side of the spectrum are the medical suppliers, pharmacy, but especially medical equipment. And we work a lot in urology with medical equipment. And then you have the health insurance companies. So if you look at this, indeed, you start to realize that this is indeed a very important powerhouse. It's growing. I always thought, well, if I look in the Netherlands, how much money do we spend there? Or if I look in Turkey, how much money do we spend there? I see an enormous growth in that field. When I look outside my window in my office in Turkey right now, I see we are building a humongous new tower. There is no money, I was told. There is inflation, but still healthcare is expanding. And if you look at it, it becomes larger, and the word complex. In the past, when I was trained, it was so easy. You had voiding complaints and Then you had a TORP, that was it. And suddenly there was, when I was a resident, Herb Lepore in the news. Jesus, MSD had this new drug. And everybody was traveling around, Jesus, we don't need surgery anymore. It's solved. And nowadays you can even choose of much more. So if I have voiding complaints, should I have a Urolift? It's like a facelift for my prostate. Or should I have something like for my headache, a drug, which also maybe helps a little bit my erections, if needed, you know. But you can maybe need it all day long. So use the right drug, or any of the other devices. Or do you want to go for the really right stuff, the big enucleations? And if you really want the best of it, have a robot. So in this, obviously, the sky is the limit. If you look at the healthcare policies, again, I look daily on what's happening in different parts of the world, and the Netherlands is a very nice small country where you can see what's happening. Obviously, guidelines are needed. What is needed and why? And when we were looking at this Focal Therapy Society, Tom always has this American perspective. He talks about coding system. I said, Tom, if you want, we can also talk about the Dutch coding system, the Turkish coding system. He says, I'm not interested. Reimbursement. Of what? Well, of therapies, focal therapy treatments, devices. I want to be able to use them. And again, there comes this partnership in. How will we ever be able to reach that goal? How can we, in a good way, work together? The benefits of technology have been addressed here. It's all minimal invasive, no morbidity, it's all fantastic. It's like Alice in Wonderland. It's not. And I was thinking next year, we're going to have a session on looking at complications. We never talk about them. Handling and prevention of complications. When I started with IRE, the first thing I got an email from a urologist somewhere in Europe, and he said, well, this patient was sent to me. He was treated by a radiologist, interventional radiologist with IRE with radiation therapy before. He has a fantastic, nice fistula. Great for IRE. But where do you read it? Nowhere. You read it because you're going to put them somewhere under the carpet. You want to hide these. I think looking at complications, not just on the sunny side of it, but also when it starts raining and when there's stormy weather, we should have a careful look at that together. Collecting data is important. Yeah, we have a lot of people doing research, but what makes sense and what makes no sense? I've been working for many years with one of my colleagues. He's an engineer, was looking at what can you do with ultrasound. But he was doing research for research. He said, it's funny. Yeah, I took care of 20 years of his salary. But what came out of it? I questioned that. So that's where our partners from industry come in. You want to have a product. I see the guys from Quelle sitting in the back. They have been hunting me down for years, telling me that their device is the best. Maybe it is. Maybe it is one of the best. But it can only be in collaboration with urologists, and that's what they did. I think working together improved what is at the moment available. Looking at the different steps that need to be taken, and all of them cost money. But are we really willing to do this first step where we do MRI studies and compare them to radical prostatectomies? That's not easy. Who's going to fund it actually? Nobody's interested. If you go to Philips and say, well, can we do a study with 25 radical prostatectomies? Well, they say, no, but you see where the lesion is. And when I was listening to the many talks, I got a little bit confused. We got people that are very convinced about what they see, and you have those that see what nobody sees yet. But what should we see, and how can we see better? Are we really interested in collecting data after a product is introduced? And again, who's paying for that? That's where we need to work together on that. Funding is important, but you need to also have people who are willing to dedicate their time for that. And again, looking at the academics only doesn't make sense. We need to collaborate as a medical community in this. Yeah, how reliable are our data? Self-promotion. I've been doing this as well. since I was finishing my training. And I still remember that I was thinking, how can I get a big number of patients to my center to help me establish my name? And my chief was a bright guy, Frans de Bruyne. He said, well, there's soon a soccer game in the Netherlands. And what we do, we will try to squeeze ourselves in between those 15 minutes of break, and we tell we've got something new. And that worked. So what I did is I could treat a lot of patients in microwave at that time. I could write papers and was promoting myself. And I was thinking I did something good. Maybe I did. But what I also realized that sometimes it's very difficult to be very honest. And again, you need your peers to slow you down, and you need to slow down and become realistic when you talk with your partners from industry, but you still need to convince them that they need to work together with you. All of us are victims of wanting to be on this podium. How do you become an expert? That was a very good question. How do you select them? That's not easy. Everybody thinks he's an expert, even if you work in a small general practice. But to bring them, all of them together and say, well, we humbly work on a project together, that's I think it's our next step that we need to achieve. Access to data. Everybody should be able to have a look at what you're collecting. When we talked about the Focal Therapy Society, we wanted to create a registry. We were approached by some colleagues where the data were collected to an institute. It's very difficult to have access to data in an institute. You want to keep them. And I think that's the task of the Focal Therapy Society, that we're able to share all these data. Who's going to publish from that? How much control will be there again from industry? And in the past, I managed to get funding from industry, from our partners. It's not a dirty word to get dirty money, but from our partners. And they allowed us to do research, and we were going to share the outcome, the data, and we were going to publish them unbiased. Sometimes they didn't like that. I still remember one of the companies that was doing something on image enhancement in bladder cancer, and the outcome of the study was not favorable, 1,000 patients randomized. So I was thinking, I wish it would be favorable, but you cannot make it look better than it is. I'm still using that technology, but the partners were not happy. And the partners indicated that they now had to move on to somebody else who maybe could present better on that. And yes, you need to have steering committees overseeing all this. If we talk about reading MRIs, doing focal therapies, I think we should look beyond than just buying or selling a machine. And again, if we talk about a partnership, getting industry engaged, we should together work on how best position those technologies. We should offer a nice certificate from whom? Maybe a society, maybe a group of experts, but a society, I think, gives much more credibility. We should mentor each other. So how can we improve our treatments? Well, that's only like I sometimes do, go to another place. I go there, they welcome me as an expert, and when I leave back home, I say, Jesus, I humbly salute you because I learned from you again. So I think that's also included in that, and we need to do that together. And then we've got guidelines. Well, what is causing this, doctor? How can we solve this? Well, everybody has a smart answer, but guidelines help us. In the focal therapy team, until now, we have had consensus meetings. And why? Because there are not many data out there that can produce guidelines for us. And how can we produce more data? Again, by working together on this. Patents, I think, last of it, I looked at this booklet where people say, and they should be proud about that, they say, well, I've been creative and I've been involved in something. I've contributed to something. You should not be afraid of sharing with others that you did something nice. And most of it sometimes pops up even if it's not intended. So, Tom, I want to thank you for this nice talk. And I hope that you share the vision that I have I hope it's a little bit further away, but we always should look where are we now and should try to avoid any problems. Thank you.